When you hear Swedish cars, you probably think of safe, sensible Volvos or quirky Saab sedans your high school math teacher drove. You don't think sports car, and yet Saab actually made one, a real one, with pop-up headlights, a fiberglass body, and a two-stroke engine that sounded like a caffeinated chainsaw. Surprised? You should be. Saab wasn't exactly gunning for Ferrari or even MG back in the day. They were the brand you turned to if you wanted something front-wheel drive, solid in a snowstorm, and just a little weird in the best way possible. But for a short stretch of time, someone at Saab said, "What if we made something fun?" Enter the Saab Sonett, a car so strange, so unexpected, and so lovable that it still confuses people at car shows today. This isn't your typical classic sports car story. It's the tale of an underdog with aircraft DNA and a serious case of, let's do things differently. Buckle up. This is going to get wonderfully weird. Before Saab was making quirky cars, they were building fighter jets. Seriously, Saab started out as an aerospace company crafting sleek, fast, and deadly machines for the Swedish Air Force. So when they eventually turned their attention to cars, they didn't exactly follow the usual automotive rulebook. Instead, they brought along their aircraft mindset: lightweight construction, aerodynamic shapes, and a love for doing things their own way. That influence showed up immediately. The first Saab car, the 92, looked like a drop of water with wheels, a design focused entirely on slicing through air with minimal resistance. It wasn't sexy in the traditional sense, but it was clever and light and front-wheel drive, long before that was the cool thing to do. From the beginning, Saab cars were a little odd. Two-stroke engines, airplane-style dashboards, and bodies that seemed drawn by a wind tunnel rather than a stylus pen. But they worked. They were efficient, durable, and different. And that different DNA would later shape the unlikely birth of the Saab Sonett. The story of the first Saab Sonett starts not in a design studio or shiny factory, but in a barn. Literally. In the mid-1950s, a small group of Saab engineers, led by racing enthusiast Rolf Melde, decided that the brand needed something fun, something sporty. So with almost no budget and a whole lot of determination, they built a prototype by hand in a wooden shed near Saab's main plant in Trollhättan. What they created was the Saab Sonett I, a tiny, featherweight two-seater with a fiberglass body and an aluminum space frame. It weighed just over 1,200 pounds, making it lighter than most modern motorcycles. Under the hood was a 748 cubic centimeter two-stroke, three-cylinder engine pumping out a mighty 57 horsepower. That may not sound like much, but in something that's small and light, it made for a surprisingly peppy ride. Only 6 Sonett I prototypes were ever made. The car was a bold step in a new direction, but Saab wasn't ready to commit, especially with sedan production taking priority. The Sonett I was shelved, filed under "cool idea, wrong time." But it wouldn't be the last we'd hear of it. By the mid-1960s, the car world had changed, and Saab saw an opening. America was in love with sporty cars. The British had the MGB and Triumph TR4, while Detroit was pumping out Mustangs faster than anyone could count. Everywhere you looked, people were cruising in lightweight roadsters or muscle-bound coupes. And Saab? Well, they were still making practical sedans that looked like something your quirky uncle would drive. But someone at Saab hadn't forgotten the little fiberglass experiment from a decade earlier. And just like that, the Sonett was back, this time as the Sonett II. Gone was the open-top roadster vibe. Instead, the Sonett II came wrapped in a sleek fastback design with a long glass rear window that looked suspiciously like something off a Plymouth Barracuda. It was compact, low-slung, and distinctly odd in that very Saab way, but it had presence and a lot of personality. Under the hood was an upgraded 841 cubic centimeter version of Saab's trusty two-stroke, three-cylinder engine, now putting out 60 horsepower. It still sounded like an angry hornet's nest, and thanks to the car's featherweight body, it actually moved pretty well. But there was one big issue: the engine. In Sweden, mixing oil with your gas to run a two-stroke engine wasn't a big deal. In America, it was a headache. Smoky exhaust, unusual maintenance, and a general lack of torque made the Sonett II a tough sell across the Atlantic. The car looked great and drove with spirit, but the drivetrain left American buyers scratching their heads. Saab had built something cool, but it wasn't quite ready for prime time. Saab got the message loud and clear. Americans weren't vibing with two-stroke engines in their cars. Snowmobiles? Sure. Chainsaws? Absolutely. But a car that puffed smoke and needed you to play backyard chemist every time you filled up? Hard pass. So Saab did the logical thing. They ditched the smoky screamer and gave the Sonett a grown-up heart. Enter the Ford Taunus 4, a compact four-stroke engine that came straight out of Ford's European parts bin. At 1.5 liters and 65 horsepower, it wasn't going to melt your face off, but it made the Sonett feel more refined, more usable, and, crucially, more appealing to buyers outside of Sweden. No more premix, no more exhaust clouds. Just hop in, turn the key and go. The result was the Sonett I, launched in 1967. The car looked pretty much the same as the Sonett II, but under the surface it felt like a totally different beast. It had more torque, smoother power delivery, and better drivability all around. Handling also got a boost thanks to the V4's broader power band and slightly revised suspension setup. You could finally enjoy the twisty back roads without worrying if you were about to blow your crank seals. And guess what? It worked. Around 1,600 Sonett 4s were sold between 1967 and 1969, most of them in the US at a price of just over $3,000. It offered a genuinely unique alternative to the MGBS and Fiat Spiders of the era. It wasn't the fastest, it wasn't the flashiest, but it was reliable, fun, and delightfully odd, just the way Saab liked it. By 1970, Saab knew it needed to give the Sonett a glow-up. The original fastback shape was getting a little dated, and the sports car world was moving fast, literally and stylistically. So rather than scrap the project, Saab gave it a facelift and called it the Sonett III, a final stylish attempt to stay in the game. First thing you'll notice? Pop-up headlights. Yes, Saab went full 70s cool. Gone were the bug-eyed recessed lamps of the earlier cars, replaced by manually operated pop-ups that made the car look instantly sleeker and gave it a solid boost in driveway charisma. The rear window? Flattened. The curved glass of the Sonett II was beautiful, but expensive and complicated, so Saab swapped it for a flat piece that hinged upward, adding a surprising bit of practicality. The styling came courtesy of Sergio Coggiola, an Italian designer who gave the car a sharper, more aggressive profile without losing its Scandinavian weirdness. Inside, things got an upgrade too. Finally, a floor-mounted shifter instead of the old column change, and a more modern dash layout. It still wasn't luxury, but it no longer felt like a DIY project either. Under the hood, the trusty Ford V4 was bored out to 1.7 liters, but thanks to tightening emissions regulations, horsepower stayed pretty much flat, around 65 horsepower. It had enough grunt to get out of its own way, but you weren't winning any drag races. Still, with a curb weight just under 2,000 pounds, it offered a fun, tossable drive that let you use every last pony without breaking the speed limit. The Sonett III earned some real respect. Road and Track praised its communicative steering and balanced handling, though they noted a few downsides. The clutch felt vague, the brakes needed work, and servicing the engine required Houdini-level contortion. Still, for a car as niche as the Sonett, it was a surprisingly competent package, and the best version yet. Just as the Sonett III was hitting its stride, the world had other plans. In 1973, the global oil crisis turned the car industry on its head. Gas prices skyrocketed, speed limits were slashed, and suddenly, fun-to-drive sports cars weren't exactly top priority. Buyers wanted economy, not eccentricity, and certainly not something that ran on premium fuel and looked like it came from a sci-fi comic. But if that wasn't enough of a blow, new U.S. crash regulations sealed the deal. Saab had to fit the Sonett III with oversized 5-inch safety bumpers, massive rubber-clad blocks that completely threw off the car's proportions. What was once a clean, quirky coupe now looked like it had grown a mustache and a chin strap overnight. With performance down, costs up, and sales dropping fast, Saab made the tough call in 1974. Sonett production was officially over. In the end, just over 10,000 sonnets were built across all three generations. A modest number by industry standards, but enough to leave a legacy. The Sonnet had never been a volume car. It was always a niche oddity, bought by those who wanted something different, something clever, something fun. And while the era ended quietly, the impact has lasted far longer than anyone at Saab probably imagined. The Saab Sonett isn't for everyone. It never was. But for the enthusiast who wants a piece of history, a quirky design, and a driving experience that's as raw and rewarding as it is odd, there's nothing else quite like it. So the question is, would you take a Sonett over a classic MG, Spitfire, or Alpha Spider? Let us know. And if you've ever driven one, or better yet, owned one, drop a comment. We'd love to hear your story. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most bizarre sports cars ever created, click the subscribe button